I wiped the counter slowly before I even took the cake out. The kitchen was quiet, just the ticking clock above the sink and the kettle groaning its last breath. I reached into the fridge, pulled out the box, and peeled it open like I was unwrapping. Something sacred, vanilla, the same frosting I'd made since he was 6. The scent hit me like a soft knock to the chest. I set the cake on the counter, and my hands hovered over the icing bag. I don't know why I still piped the edges. My hands shook a little as I did it, the lines not as even as they used to be. Still, I moved slowly, tracing the shape of something I wasn't ready to let go of. I whispered his name. I didn't mean to, but it slipped out. Michael. Just his name. Soft, like a question. Like maybe if I said it gently enough, he'd walk through the door. I still had the candles. 5 of them. Not because he was 5, but because that's how many I used to keep in the drawer, and it just stuck. I lined them up on the sideboard, didn't stick them in, just set them there like they were waiting for permission to matter. Outside, the light stretched golden and slowed across the lawn. The kind of light that makes everything look tender, even when it isn't. I wiped my hands on the towel and stepped back from the counter. The cake looked beautiful, if I'm being honest, like it always did. But this time, I didn't let myself believe that beauty would be enough to bring him home. I stood there for a long while, just breathing, just looking. And for one slow second, I thought maybe I'd hear footsteps. Maybe the gate would creak. Maybe the doorbell. But nothing came. So I turned off the kettle, sat down at the table, and waited, just in case. The phone sat right there on the table, screen dark, like a stone I kept glancing at out of habit. Every buzz wasn't him. I knew it before I looked. One was the pharmacy. Another weather alert. Spam texts. Things that didn't carry his voice, but still made my heart jump like they might. I reached for it more times than I care to admit. Just to check the volume, the battery, the signal, as if any of those things had anything to do with the silence between us. The hum of the fridge felt louder than usual. The air was thick with leftover sugar and something less sweet. Regret. Maybe. I remember telling him once that I didn't need gifts. Just a call. Just to know I crossed his mind. He laughed and said, "Of course, Mom. Always." But that was years ago. The kind of laugh that leaves your ears before it settles. In your memory. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the carpet. The birds were quieting. The world is preparing for sleep. And I sat there, in the quiet hum of that early evening, wondering if I'd made it too easy to forget me. I stared at the phone again. Still dark. Still silent. And for the first time, in a while, I didn't reach for it. I just let it be. The sunlight stretched long across the kitchen floor, pouring in through the lace curtains and painting everything gold. I stood by the sink watching it move, slow as honey. I told myself he was busy, maybe stuck in traffic, maybe just late. People forget, I whispered, even when they don't mean to. But somewhere deep, I already knew. There's a knowing mother's, Carrie that has no shape, no sound. Just weight, a heaviness that settles behind the ribs and waits. I bruised my hands, wiping the counter again, though it was already clean. Rearranging the chairs, turning the kettle on, then off, then on again. I checked the front steps through the window. Nothing but the breeze stirring the hydrangeas. The ache didn't come fast. It came soft and slow, like an old friend easing into the room without a word. I felt it in my spine first, in the way I stood too straight for too long. Then in my chest, that hollow pulse of silence where a voice should have been. I walked over, to the cake, still untouched, still lovely in its box. I smoothed the edges of the frosting with the back of a spoon, not because it needed it, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. Outside, the light shifted. The amber turned deeper, warmer, but lonelier too. Dusk wrapped itself around the windowsill like a shawl I hadn't asked for. I told myself again that he might still come. Maybe he lost track of time. Maybe he'd walk through the door with that sheepish grin and say, "Sorry, Mom, you know how work is." And I'd smile, and everything would be soft again. But that's not what happened. Instead, the light faded, and I stood there in the quiet, one hand on the back of the chair, the other pressed gently to my chest, like I was keeping myself from unraveling. I didn't cry. I just breathed slowly. Let the ache settle. Let the evening take over. Because sometimes, the absence says more than the arrival ever could. The candles sat where I left them, right on the edge of the cake box, lined up in their little row like soldiers who never got their orders. I used to light them every year, even after he moved out, even when I knew he wouldn't come. It felt like holding space for hope. But this year, I didn't light them. I thought about it. The matchbox was still in the drawer next to the old tea towels and twist ties. My fingers even brushed it once, but I closed the drawer without taking it out. The house was quiet, not just silent, but still, like it knew the celebration wasn't coming, like it didn't want to pretend either. I sat down with a sigh, hands in my lap. My eyes rested on those 5 tiny candles, red, yellow, green. Bright little things that once meant cake and laughter and the kind of joy that bubbles up before it can be named. Now they looked like artifacts. Unlit candles can't burn you, I thought. They can't drip wax on the table or flicker out too soon. They just sit there, harmless. And maybe that's what I needed. A moment that didn't try to pretend. Outside, the sky deepened into blue, and the house closed in gently around me. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and icing. I let the candles stay where they were, not out of spite, not even sadness, just peace, or something close to it. I peeled the box back like it might argue with me. The tape stuck to my fingers for a second before letting go. I didn't grab a plate, didn't cut it properly. I just broke off a corner with my hand and held it for a moment. The cake was soft, still fresh. The scent of vanilla rose up, warm and familiar, like old bed sheets or a favorite sweater tucked too far back in the closet. I took a bite, let it melt slowly on my tongue. It didn't taste the same. It was sweet, sure, rich, but flat. Like the joy had been baked out of it somewhere along the way, or maybe it was just me. Maybe flavor needs laughter to bloom. I leaned against the counter, chewing slowly, the quiet pressing in from every side. Overhead, the kitchen light buzzed softly, flickering the way it does when it's ready to be changed. The refrigerator kicked on again with a low hum. I looked at the empty space across the table. I imagined him there, big as life, cracking jokes while licking frosting off his finger. I saw it so clearly it hurt. I took another bite, just to feel something. The sugar sat heavy on my tongue, like a memory gone stale. I didn't eat more than that corner. Didn't need to. Sometimes you taste enough to know what's missing. Folded the box closed again. Pressed the flap down gently, like putting a lid on something that had already gone cold. And I stood there for a long while, letting the silence wash over me. It didn't echo. It just settled. The napkins were still out, white with little blue birds. Emma picked them once from the dollar store because she said they looked happy. I'd set them at each place, even though I knew there wouldn't be anyone sitting there. I gathered them slowly, one by one. Folded each into a square like I was tucking away a thought. The kind you don't want to lose, but can't quite bear to keep out in the open. The room was cooler now. The oven had long since gone cold. Outside, the porch light flickered on, catching the edge of the window just enough to send a soft glow across the table. I sat down in the chair by the window, the one with the worn armrest and cushion that sinks just right. I held the last napkin in my hands for a moment before folding it too. My hands rested still in my lap, and for the first time all day, I didn't try to fill the silence. I let it stretch, let it hold me, and I breathed. Shallow, quiet even. Not because I was okay, but because the day had ended and I hadn't broken. Somehow, that felt like enough. I opened the drawer with both hands, even though it didn't need both. The wood stuck a little, like it always does when it's damp, outside. The sunlight from the garden slid in through the window, painting the floor with warm, yellow streaks. I sat on the chair near the door and pulled the card out carefully. The paper was a little wrinkled now, corners curled like flower petals in summer heat. It was yellow construction paper, thick and soft, the kind that tears if you fold it too tight. On the front, a butterfly with wings too big for its body, colored in orange and purple. The crayon marks were pressed deep, like he wanted them to last. "You're the best mom ever," it said, in that shaky, proud handwriting that only a 7-year-old could make look like a trophy. I ran my thumb across the bottom corner. The crayon had smudged there years ago, probably from my own hand. I used to keep it in the fridge, clipped with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Every time he walked by, he'd grin at it like he forgot he made it, and I'd laugh and say, "That butterfly's still flying, you know." "Yeah," he'd say. "She's got strong wings." I smiled, holding it now, whispering, "She still does, sweetheart." The scent of the card hadn't changed. A little like glue, a little like dust and something else. Maybe memory, maybe me. The lilacs outside brushed against the window frame as the breeze rolled through, and for a moment, it felt like he was small again. Like if I looked up, I'd see him running through the grass, shoelaces undone and cheeks red from the wind. I closed the card and held it to my chest, letting my eyes close for just a minute. Just long enough to let that memory settle back where it belonged, not erased, not corrected, just honored. It used to be so simple. He'd see me at the end of the driveway, arms open, and he'd take off running, knees skinned, face sticky from popsicles, sometimes dragging his backpack or a muddy stick he insisted was magic. I didn't need to bend low. He'd crash into me like the world had been holding its breath until we touched. I was home to him. The answer to everything. If he had a bad day, he found my lap. If he had a secret, he whispered it into my shoulder, like the fabric could keep it safe. And if he had a win, even a small one, he ran to me like I was the only person who'd clap hard enough. I remember one afternoon, he brought me a worm in a jar and said, "She's lonely. Can you talk to her?" I sat on the porch with that jar for 20 minutes while he played in the dirt, telling the worm stories about the moon and garden snakes. That was enough for him, knowing I was near, knowing I'd talk to anything that mattered to him. The breeze today carries the same scent it did back then, cut grass, wildflowers, a bit of sun-warmed earth. The porch railing still creaks where I lean, and the wind chimes sound the same, like old friends catching up. Sometimes I wonder if I raised him too gently, if I wrapped him in too much safety, made the world so soft that he never had to look back once he left. Or maybe he just forgot that home doesn't mean the house. It means the person who opens their arms without asking questions. The sound of a lawnmower hums in the distance, and I watch the dust float in the air where sunlight hits the railing. I wonder when the last time was that he reached for me without hesitation. No phone call, no reminder, just instinct. That's the part that stays with me. The quiet ache of being someone's whole sky, then slowly becoming the weather report they forget to check. He used to say it without thinking. "Mama," with a yawn, with a laugh, with a sleepy hand rubbing his eye from the back seat. It was the kind of word that fit his mouth like it belonged there, soft, warm, full of trust. I don't remember the exact last time he said it. Maybe that's what hurts. It probably slipped out on some ordinary morning. He might have been grabbing a granola bar or asking for lunch money. I might have been distracted, folding towels or fussing with my keys. I didn't hold on to it then, because I didn't know it would be the last. That word faded slowly. One day it was Mom, and the next, Ma. Shorter, sharper. Eventually, it just became silent between text messages. I sat on the garden bench this morning, watching clouds drift across the sky, wondering when the softness left his voice, wondering when mine stopped reaching for it. There's a hush that lives in those moments, like fog pressing against glass. It doesn't ask for anything. It just rests there, heavy and still. I closed my eyes and whispered the word to myself. Mama! Just to feel how it landed in the air. It was fragile now. A dried petal in a book I forgot I owned. The year he packed his boxes, I planted lilacs by the back fence. It wasn't a plan. I just saw them at the nursery and picked them. Up. He loved the smell when he was little. Said it reminded him of bubble baths and story time. I think I wanted that scent to linger even if he didn't. The ground was damp that morning, and I remember kneeling with my hands deep in the soil, pressing each root down like I was trying to anchor something more than flowers. The wind had a chill, but the sky was blue, and the birds were singing like they had no idea what was being let go. He didn't say much when he left. A short hug, a promise to call. The kind of goodbye that's supposed to feel like a beginning. But all I felt was the space he left behind. Every spring, those lilacs bloom like they've got something to prove. Bright, bold, fragrant. They push through storms and cold snaps. I kneel beside them every year, just like I did that first day, fingers brushing soft petals. They're taller now, stronger, and somehow still waiting. Still no visit. I murmured to them today, half laughing. But look at you. Showing. Off anyway. The scent brought tears I didn't expect. It always does, because it's not just a flower. It's bedtime hugs and bubble bath hair. It's a little boy's arms wrapped around my neck. It's what I held on to when he stopped holding on to me. I stayed there for a while, wiping my hands on my apron, letting the breeze lift my hair and carry the memory with it. He used to follow me like a shadow. My feet were his compass, my voice, the map. When he was scared, he ran to me. When he was proud, he wanted me to see it first. I was everything he believed in. There's this one afternoon I always remember. He fell off his bike. Nothing bad, just scraped his knee. But he cried, like his whole world ended. I opened the screen door and didn't even have to call him. He just ran, arms open, tears streaked across dirt-smudged cheeks. I didn't say a word, just held him. I remember thinking, this is what it means to be the sun in someone's sky. Now? I don't know. I leave messages. Sometimes I get a, sorry, got busy. Sometimes nothing. His life spins forward and I still shine, but I'm far off, like a lighthouse too distant to be useful. The garden air is warming, bees drifting lazily between blooms. The breeze wraps around my shoulders, soft and familiar. I wonder if he remembers, if there's a part of him that still carries my voice, even when he doesn't call back. Sometimes I look at the flowers, see how they lean toward the sun no matter how far it feels. And I think, maybe I'm still doing my job. Just more quietly now. There's a drawer in the hallway I don't open. Often. It's the one below the table with the chipped edge and the bowl of keys we never use anymore. Inside, it smells like cedar and old glue. A mix of childhood and time. Macaroni glued to paper. Glitter stuck in the folds. Construction hearts with my name misspelled in red marker. They're all in there, stacked like a paper timeline of his. Love. Raw, messy, unfiltered. I pulled one out today. A crooked Valentine that said, I love you as big as the sky. The marker bled through the back, like his love couldn't be contained by the page. I held it to my chest, just for a second. Just long enough to remember the little boy whose hugs came with full body weight, who made cards because he thought words mattered more than toys. I smiled and placed it back in the drawer, shutting it gently. He's still in there. Somewhere. Between the glitter and the glue. The ring startled me. It had been so quiet all morning, just the sound of water running and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. I had just finished rinsing the last dish, the towel slipping from my hand to the counter when the phone buzzed. My heart leapt too fast. I stood there for a second, staring at it. It buzzed again. I reached with damp fingers, wiping them quickly. On my apron, even though they'd already smudged the screen. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, just that strange blend of hope and history. I picked it up too gently, like it might break if I pressed too hard. "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than I expected. "Hey, Mom," he said, cheerful. Light, like it was just any day. The sun slanted across the kitchen tiles, catching the edge of the toaster, making the whole room glow soft gold. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady my breathing, trying not to sound too eager. "I was just calling to check in," he added. The breeze nudged the curtains, but didn't lift them. Everything felt paused, waiting for the part of the call that mattered. There was a silence after I said hello, just a breath long. Then he chuckled. "Oh, was that today?" I stared at the window as his voice filled my ear, light and easy, like we were talking about some forgotten TV show. I didn't answer right away. "Geez, I thought it was next week. Work's been crazy. You know how it is." I swallowed hard. "It's okay," I said, my voice soft but steady. "You've got a lot going on." He laughed again, breezy. "You know me, always chasing the clock." I smiled, but something inside me folded up, neat and small, like a napkin tucked into a drawer. "Yeah," I whispered. "You've always been like that." "I meant to call first," he went on. "Just forgot the date. I'm sorry." The dog next door barked, loud and sudden, and I turned my face toward the sound like it might distract me. But it didn't. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I held it anyway, both hands wrapped around the cup like it could keep me grounded. "It's all right," I said again. "I didn't really do anything special." "You sure? I can swing by next week, bring you something sweet." "Don't worry about it," I said, quieter this time. "You've got work, and I know you're busy." He talked a little more after that, about meetings and traffic and the grocery store lines. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Smiled, though he wouldn't feel it. The kind of smile you wear when you're remembering something that isn't there anymore. I told him it was fine, that I'd been busy too, that it was just another day. The words rolled out of my mouth so easily, I almost believed them myself. "You didn't miss much," I said, curling the phone cord around my finger, the plastic warm from my grip. Honestly, I didn't even notice until late in the day. He laughed softly. "See? I knew you'd be cool about it. Cool. That's what I had become. Cool about being forgotten." I leaned against the clean counter, the lemon scent from the soap still clinging to my hands. Outside, the sunlight hit the window just right, too bright on the tile, almost blinding. I squinted at it, not moving. "I'm glad you called," I said. "Really?" The clock above the stove ticked once, then again. Loud. Too loud. "You're the best," he said, before hanging up. I set the phone down and stood there. My smile lingered, but not because it felt good. It lingered because it had nowhere else to go. After he hung up, I stayed there. My hand still rested on the phone like it was holding something fragile, or maybe just trying to hold on to the sound of his voice. The room didn't shift. It didn't react. It just stayed still, like it had already learned this rhythm. The hum of the refrigerator came and went, low and steady. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower buzzed faintly, like summer dragging itself across the yard. But inside, nothing moved. I pressed my palm flat to the counter, needing the feel of something solid. The ache in my chest wasn't sharp. It didn't sting. It just settled. Right beneath the ribs, warm and slow, like something familiar I'd forgotten how to carry. I thought about saying something else before he'd hung up. Maybe reminding him of the cake. Maybe asking if he remembered last year, or the year before. But what would have changed? I looked toward the kitchen window. The sunlight had shifted again, more golden now, casting long lines across the floor. It made the table look like a painting. Empty chairs, a full bowl of fruit. Nothing out of place, but something missing all the same. I took a deep breath and let it go slow. Let the ache stay. I wasn't in a rush to push it out. Some aches just need to be felt. I walked to the counter and looked at the box. It was still, sitting there, just where I left it. Frosting smooth and untouched under the plastic window. 5 candles rested beside it in a little bundle, tied with a string I found in the drawer. I could have told him. I could have said, "I made your favorite." I could have joked about the candles, how they're the same ones I've kept for years. I could have asked, "Do you remember when we used to sneak bites before dinner?" But I didn't. My hand hovered near the box, fingers resting lightly on the corner, not enough to leave a mark. The kitchen has warmed up now. Sunlight pooled across the counter. Outside, the lilacs moved gently in the breeze, their scent barely reaching through the open window. I could have told him. But some things, I've learned, are too sacred to hand over to someone who won't hold them properly. The cake sat quietly, a little piece of love, untouched. It didn't feel like punishment. It felt like protection. I turned away, wiped my hands on the towel again, and let the moment pass. Some things deserve silence more than explanation. I opened the sideboard drawer, the one I rarely touched unless it was Thanksgiving or some formal thing. The placemats sat neatly folded on top, their corners tucked just so. Emma always said I folded things too carefully. I reached past them, fingers brushing over the soft edge of a lavender sachet I'd placed there years ago. The scent had faded, but not entirely. It still smelled like quiet Sundays and old, unfinished thoughts. The paper beneath it was exactly where I left it, tucked flat, crisp despite the years, like it had been waiting for my hand. I hesitated. Not out of confusion, I knew what it was. I just didn't want this to be the moment I acknowledged what it meant. I sat down slowly, the cushion of the chair sighing beneath me. Dust floated through the late afternoon sun, soft like memory. I held the envelope between my fingers. It didn't shake, not really. But there was something tender in the way I turned it over, like I might bruise it by opening it. I laid it on the table and stared at it. Funny how something so thin could hold so much. Not money, not property, just a line. One sentence that had meant hope when I first wrote it. A breeze came through the curtain, stirring the paper slightly. It shifted, just enough to whisper, just enough to feel like it knew I was here. I pressed my palm to the surface gently, breathed in the scent of cedar and ink, and whispered, "All right." I unfolded the papers carefully, smoothing them out against the table. The corners were still sharp. The ink had softened a little, faded in places from time, and maybe a bit of my own reluctance. I read the line aloud, slower than I needed to. Pending demonstration of active care. My voice cracked, not from crying, just from memory. That line. I'd written it in hope, not bitterness. Back then, I thought it was just a way to cover the future, a little safety tucked into the fine print. But now, the words felt heavier, like a note I'd written to myself and sealed in a bottle. I traced them with my finger. Active care. Such a quiet phrase. Not love, not affection. Care. I guess I thought love would always be there. But Care. That's what fades when people stop looking back. The mantel clock ticked softly behind me, steady and uncaring. The house smelled like dry paper, old wood, and something quieter. Maybe resignation. Maybe grace. I sat back and looked at the rest of the page. Names, numbers, designations. All things that meant very little if the heart behind them wasn't showing up. And mine hadn't been shown up for in a long while. Still, reading that line felt like I was holding an umbrella in the rain, one I'd carried for years without opening. I thought I wouldn't need it, that we'd walk in sunshine, always. But here I was, the sky gray above me, opening it at last. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I folded the page again and slid it back inside the envelope. I didn't need to read the rest. I already knew what I'd written, and I finally understood why. After tea, I rinsed my cup and let the steam linger in the sink. The house was quiet. That early evening is kind of quiet when everything softens. I dried my hands slowly on the shoe, towel, and walked to the hallway table. The phone was where it always sat, near the window that looked out over the yard. I stared at it for a moment, not out of doubt, just the kind of pause you take when you know something matters. I dialed her number. It still came back to me without needing to check the book. She answered on the second ring. "Hello? It's me," I said gently. "I'm ready." Her voice didn't rush. "All right. You sure?" "Yes." I nodded, though no one could see. "I'm sure." We spoke about the paperwork, the updates, the steps. I didn't ask questions. I'd already asked them years ago when I first signed it. This time, I just listened. And when she said, "I'll take care of it," I believed her. When we hung up, the click was soft but final, the kind of sound that makes you stop for a second and breathe in all the air left in the room. Outside, a cardinal tapped the window once with its beak, then fluttered away. The sound made me smile a little. They say cardinals mean someone's watching over you. I didn't cry. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, and let the stillness tell me I'd done the right thing. I never cared about the numbers. Not really. The inheritance was just logistics, a pile of paperwork and legal terms that didn't mean anything if the heart behind them wasn't there. What I wanted was something simpler. A call, a birthday remembered, a "How are you really, Mom?" Not out of obligation, out of knowing I mattered. I sat by the desk, the lamp casting a warm, amber glow across the surface. The paper felt cool under my hand, the envelope already opened, the line already read. But the feeling in my chest? That part was new and deep. Used to think maybe he didn't mean to forget. Maybe the world pulled too hard on him. But after so many missed moments, it starts to feel intentional, or at least indifferent, and that's the part that stings. I looked over at the picture of Emma on the shelf, her arms wrapped around my neck in that last school recital photo. She never forgets. Not the little things, not the big ones. She asks how I'm feeling, even when she's busy. She notices. So I sat there, hands resting on the desk, and whispered into the quiet, I just wanted to be seen. Not paid back, not praised, just acknowledged. The kind of love that knocks softly without being asked, and shows up because it remembers you need it. And if he couldn't give that, then maybe he wasn't ready to hold the rest either. I picked up the pen. The same old one James used to leave beside the ceramic dish by the phone. It feels heavier now. Not physically, but with meaning. I opened the file, the one my lawyer sent over after our call. The signature line sat there, patient, waiting for me. I wrote my name slowly. Each letter formed like it carried a decade of waiting, a birthday of silence, a holiday with no knock at the door. My hand didn't shake. It just moved with care, like I was sealing something shut, not out of anger, but from peace. The pen scratched quietly on the page. Outside, the trees rustled in the twilight breeze. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. The room felt calm, certain. I set the pen down in the dish where James always left it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't wonder if I was doing the right thing. I knew. I heard the knock before I saw her, soft twice, with that familiar rhythm her elbow always makes against the screen door. I didn't even have to look. I knew it was Clara. I opened the door and there she was, balancing a pie dish wrapped in her red checkered towel and wearing that same gentle smile she's always had, the one that makes you feel like you already said everything without speaking. "Well," she said, adjusting the pie in her hands. "You didn't think I was going to let you sit out here alone tonight, did you?" I stepped aside, and she walked in like she always does, quiet, steady, like someone who doesn't knock because she's never really been a guest. The scent of rhubarb followed her, warm and sugary, with that slight tartness that always makes my mouth water before the first bite. She set the pie down carefully on the little table between our rockers. "Still warm," she said. "Didn't even let it cool all the way. Figured it might help." I just nodded, my throat too tight to say much. She didn't ask questions, didn't push, just sat beside me, smoothed out her skirt, and rocked back. Once with a slow exhale, the cicadas hummed in the trees, filling the air with their evening song. The porch groaned beneath us, and the pie sat there between us like a soft invitation to feel what needed to be felt, without explaining why. We rocked for a long time without saying a word. The breeze was light, just enough to lift the hem of our skirts and carry the scent of sugared pie through the air. I wrapped both hands around my teacup, letting its warmth sit against my palms like a small comfort I could hold on to. Clara didn't fill the silence. She never does. That's why I love her. Some people come into silence like they're trying to fix it. Clara comes in like she's setting a blanket over it. We both stared out at the yard, watching the last of the sunlight brush across the grass, in long golden ribbons. The sky had turned that deep blue that only shows up at the edge of twilight, soft but certain. Wind chimes swayed gently above us, whispering a tune too old to name. I could hear her breathing beside me, steady and calm, like her presence had always lived here. She took a sip of tea and rested it gently back down. Still, she said nothing. Just sat with me, the way people do when they know the pain can't be rushed. I didn't speak either. I didn't need to. Sometimes the silence between two people holds more love than words ever could. Her voice came quiet, like the end of a thought she'd been carrying for a while. "Sometimes forgetting is a choice," she said, "and sometimes remembering is too." I turned to look at her. Her hands were folded in her lap, her gaze still out over the trees where the sun was dipping low behind the branches. Her words didn't push, they just landed, gentle but deep. My throat tightened. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it, like someone who knew the ache from the inside out. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. There was a weight sitting in my chest, but it didn't feel sharp. It just felt full. I swallowed. Hard. I didn't even tell him I baked it. She nodded, slow and knowing. "You shouldn't have to remind someone it's your birthday." I let out a quiet breath that felt heavier than I expected. I keep thinking maybe he just forgot, maybe he's tired, or distracted, or... Clara turned her head toward me, eyes steady. "Sweetheart, I've been tired. I've been distracted. But love? Love remembers. Maybe not the date, maybe not the details. But the person? Love remembers the person." I looked down at my hands, teacup now empty and cool. My fingers were trembling slightly, but I wasn't cold. Just tired. Deep, bone tired from carrying, hope that kept shifting further away. Clara reached out and rested her hand over mine. It was warm, solid, the kind of touch that doesn't ask anything of you, but still holds you up. "You're not invisible," she whispered. "Even if he's acting like you are." My lips parted, just slightly, and for a second I almost let the tears come. But instead, I just nodded, the movement barely there. Something inside me cracked open, not a break. Just a release, like I'd been holding my breath for longer than I realized. Clara didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Sometimes, healing starts with someone sitting beside your pain without trying to fix it. I took the first bite slow, like my mouth already knew it needed to hold the moment a little longer. The crust flaked perfectly under. My fork, braided edges, golden, kissed with sugar that crackled softly as I pressed through it. The filling was warm, just tart enough to make my tongue curl slightly before the sweet caught up to it. Rhubarb. Clara always said it was a fruit. That told the truth, sour first, then soft. I closed my eyes. Let it rest on my tongue. It tasted like care, not obligation, not habit, just the kind of love that gets up early, slices fresh stalks, and bakes them into something meant to comfort, not impress. I glanced at Clara. She didn't watch me eat. Just sipped her tea, eyes on the edge of the porch, where fireflies had started blinking in the tall grass. That's the thing about her. She never waits for thanks. I placed my fork down gently. "You made the edges fancy," I said, smiling faintly. She shrugged. "Well, if you're gonna show up, you might as well show up right." I laughed, just once, soft and surprised. The pie tasted like childhood, like birthdays when he was little. And everything was frosting and giggles. But this tasted like something else. Like love from someone who doesn't owe it, but gives it anyway. I wiped the corner of my mouth and leaned back, letting the flavor linger. It tasted like home. The rockers creaked gently in rhythm, mine just slightly ahead of hers. The porch had grown quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full instead of empty. A few stars peeked through the sky, pale and slow, as if they knew not to rush the night. We didn't speak, didn't need to. The porch light glowed steady above us, casting a golden ring across the floorboards. Moths drifted lazily in and out of its warmth, and the cicadas had mostly gone quiet, replaced by the hush of crickets and the rustle of distant trees. My hands rested on the arms of the chair, palms open, fingers still from years of doing too much. Across from me, Clara rocked in rhythm, her shoulders relaxed, her face soft in the light. The breeze had cooled now, brushing gently against my skin like a hand I didn't know I missed. I wanted to say thank you. I thought about it, let the words rise and settle on the edge of my tongue, but I didn't tell them. She already knew. Some comfort speaks loudest when no sound is made at all. I let the kettle hum without him this morning. Just one mug, just one spoon. There was a time I'd set 2 cups without thinking, his and mine. Even after he stopped coming by, I'd still set it out like maybe the habit would call him back. But now I don't reach for the second mug. The rain was soft, tapping on the kitchen window like a memory trying not to intrude. I leaned against the counter while the water warmed, breathing in the lemon balm. It's my favorite. He never liked it. Too earthy, he'd say. But I like how it settles into the air, gentle and round. When the kettle sang, I didn't rush to stop it. I let it hum for a few extra seconds, the sound curling through the room like steam rising from an open page. It didn't make me flinch. It just filled the space. I poured my cup, wrapped both hands around the warmth, and carried it to the chair by the window. The newspaper sat folded beside me, untouched. Some mornings I read it. Today I didn't need words. I just needed the quiet. Outside, the world softened in the rain. The grass shimmered, and the dogwood leaned just slightly under the weight of the weather. I sat still and watched the drops roll down the glass, one by one, like they knew how to fall gently. The ache didn't rise the way it used to. I let the quiet settle instead, let it wrap around me like something chosen, not something left behind. My hands had been still for too long. There was a day, I don't even remember when I looked down and realized I hadn't folded a towel in weeks. So I started again, one linen at a time, corner to corner, smooth, then press. The rhythm came back, soft and sure, not rushed. I didn't need to be fast, I just needed to move. I trimmed the rosemary on the sill, even though I hadn't cooked with it in days. It smelled sharp and bright. The snip of the scissors was crisp in the stillness, like a sound from another life gently returning. I wiped the picture frames, dusted the old books. Some of them hadn't been touched in years, sticky spines, forgotten bookmarks, a pressed flower in one. I held it between two fingers for a moment before sliding it back into place. I wasn't ready to read it yet, but I didn't put it away either. The light in the room was warm, cast low by the lamp I keep on near the couch. It made the corners glow, like everything had a story but didn't need to be told out loud. I moved slowly, cloth in hand, wiping the side table where his cup used to sit. Lavender polish filled the room, clean and soft. The windows stayed closed, but the breeze pressed against them gently, like the outside was asking to be let in without interrupting the peace. I paused, feeling it. Not sad, just aware. That's what it felt like. Awareness of what's here, what's gone, and what I can still tend to. I caught myself talking to the geraniums again. Just a whisper, nothing dramatic. "You're looking better today?" I said, misting their leaves. One dropped a little at the edge. I pinched it gently. "Too much rain for you, huh?" It's the kind of thing I used to say to Michael years ago when he'd shuffle in half awake. "Rough night?" I'd ask him, brushing his bangs back. He wouldn't answer, just grunt and reach for toast. But I knew the difference between tired and something heavier. Now I find myself saying those same words to Petals. The watering can was half full, and the handle creaked a little as I tilted it. The soil drank slowly, greedily. I liked the way it smelled after, the dampness, the quiet promise of life just under the surface. Outside, the sky was gray and still. Clouds hung low, but the light was soft, almost forgiving. I watched a drop slide down the window, catching its path with my eyes until it disappeared into the sill. "You're not alone, you know," I whispered, pressing my finger into the dirt, just enough to feel its cool weight. They didn't answer. They never do. But they bloom. Not all at once, but faithfully. And maybe that's what love is sometimes. Just showing up. Just saying the words, even if no one says them back. It happened slowly. I didn't mark the moment. But one evening, I sat in the living room, a bowl of soup warming my hands, and realized I wasn't filling the silence with reasons anymore. I used to tell myself stories. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he's planning something. And I just don't know yet. I'd repeat those lines over dinner, over laundry, over dishes in the sink. But that night, I didn't reach for any of them. I just let the quiet be quiet. The lamp spilled light across the rug, soft and steady. Thunder grumbled far away, low and tired. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't call anyone. I just sipped the soup, let it fill my chest with warmth, and listened to the silence settle in. It didn't feel hollow. Not that night. It felt earned. Like I had swept something clean. Not out of anger, but out of grace. I looked over at the book on the armrest, still open to the same page. The steam from the bowl drifted up beside it, curling like the edges of an old letter. I didn't miss him at that moment, not like I used to. I just missed the me who used to wait. The quilt was cool when I first laid down. I turned out the lamp, and let the darkness settle over me, familiar and soft. Rain tapped gently against the windows, steady as a lullaby. The house creaked once, and then again, like it always does when it settles for the night. I used to curl, toward the edge of the bed, toward the phone on the nightstand, waiting for the buzz, the ring, something, anything, but not anymore. Tonight, I stretched out, slowly. Let the quilt cover both sides, mine, and the one that used to ache with hope. The fabric brushed my shoulder, tucked under my chin. It felt full, not empty. Like space I had finally reclaimed. I closed my eyes, let my breathing match the rain. It wasn't loneliness, not tonight. It was quiet, and it was mine. It was just sitting, there on the edge of the table, half buried beneath coupons and grocery ads. A pink envelope, small, slightly crooked. The kind of crooked that told you it had been carried in small hands, maybe gripped too tight. My name was written across, the front in chunky, proud letters, N-A-N-A. Stickers of hearts and stars crowded the corners, some peeling up at the edges like they'd been stuck on with love and not precision. I reached for it slowly, my fingers pausing just above the paper. There was something about the way it looked. Bright, against all that beige, that stopped me, like it didn't want to be opened just yet, like it wanted to be noticed. The drizzle tapped gently on the porch roof. I could smell the earth through the screen door, wet and warm. The kettle was humming low behind me, but I didn't move toward it. I just held the envelope in both hands and stared at it. It wasn't heavy, but it carried something in it. Not just the weight of the paper. It was something else, something that stirred in my chest the moment I touched it, like the first breath after crying. A kind of lightness that didn't come from relief, but from being remembered. I smiled a little, soft and unsure, and walked the envelope inside. I peeled the flap back carefully, trying not to tear the stickers. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper, folded twice. The lines were faint, but the words didn't care about the lines. They danced across the page, uneven and loud, drawn in thick purple markers. "Happy B-Day, Nana," it read. Underneath was a crooked heart, drawn too hard in one spot so the paper was beginning to pucker. I could almost see her there, tongue between her teeth, gripping the marker like it might fly away, trying to fit all her love into one little page. I pressed, my fingers to the purple ink, feeling the weight of it without smudging. The scent of the tea drifted through the kitchen. Light streamed through the lace curtains and touched the corner of the page. She had remembered. Not because someone reminded her, not because it was on a calendar, but because she felt it. Because I mattered to her. It wasn't just a card. It was breathtaking. It was a heartbeat. It was the thread that kept me tied to the world that sometimes forgot I was still here. I didn't make it to the chair. I sat right there on the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinet, card still open in my lap. My knees pulled in close, one hand bracing the page as the other came up to my chest. And then the tears came, not loud, not messy, just slow, full, like the kind that don't ask for permission, only presence. I leaned my head back against the cupboard, eyes drifting, to the ceiling as I tried to blink them away. But I didn't stop them. Not this time. I let them fall. One slipped down past my cheek, catching the edge of my mouth. Another followed, soaking into the collar of my shirt. They weren't tears of grief, not fully. They were something else. Something older. A tenderness I hadn't let myself feel in too long. The card rested on my lap, bright and proud. Happy B-Day, Nana. I read it again through blurry eyes and felt something warm crack open in my chest. Her love didn't need a reason, didn't need ceremony or repayment. It just came, bold, messy, and perfectly imperfect. The kettle started to whistle. I didn't move. I let it sing in the background, high and familiar, like it was marking the moment in its own way. I closed my eyes for a second, let the warmth of the tears roll down freely. No shame, no hiding. Just softness. She had remembered. And in doing so, she reminded me of something I'd forgotten, how it feels to be seen without asking. It wasn't a fix, that little note. It didn't make everything better, but it did something else. It curled into the ache like a soft patch over fraying cloth. I looked at it again, still on the table, still a little wrinkled where my fingers had held too tight. Michael had forgotten. Again. But Emma remembered. Without effort. Without expectation. She remembered because that's what love does when it's still close to the ground, when it hasn't learned how to complicate itself yet. I lifted the card and held it to my chest, letting the edges press into my sweater. It didn't erase the pain, but it didn't need to. Sometimes we don't need the whole thing healed. We just need something to hold the shape of what used to be. The rain was still falling outside, gentle, steady. The kind of rain that doesn't ask you to stay inside, just asks you to listen. The window pane fogged in the corner, and I traced a small heart into it with my finger before wiping it away. The kitchen still smelled of cake I hadn't sliced, of jam I hadn't used. But now, mixed in, was the scent of something lighter. It smelled like hope. I opened the drawer carefully, the one I hadn't touched in months. It creaked the way old drawers sew, tired, but dependable. Inside, the familiar colors greeted me. Crayon cards, smudged fingerprints, butterflies with wings too big for the page. To Mom, written in that uncertain early handwriting that somehow always knew exactly where to land. I pulled the stack forward gently, and in the space I'd left for nothing in particular, I placed Emma's card. Not to cover the old ones, to continue the line. Her butterfly didn't have the same shape. It was smaller, fewer details, but it held the same kind of love, the same kind of faith. I pressed my palm flat over both, his and hers. My hand trembled, just slightly, but I smiled through it. The story wasn't over. Not mine, not his. And, now, not hers either. Some things stretch across generations like vines, quiet, persistent, beautiful. And this was one of them. He walked in with a bouquet of daisies, grocery store daisies, wrapped in cellophane and too much plastic. Tape. His half grin hit me first, that same lopsided smile that used to soften me like butter in a warm pan. But today, it didn't land the same. Not after the week of silence. "Hey, Mom," he said, stepping inside before I even answered. "Sorry, I've been swamped." The word swamped made my chest tighten. He said it like it explained everything, like forgetting your mother's birthday was some clerical error on a crowded to-do list. I looked down at the flowers, bright and yellow, and a little too cheerful for the air between us. "You didn't have to bring anything," I said, stepping back to let him pass. My voice was level, practiced, polite. "Still," he shrugged, "they were right by the register. I thought of you." That part made me pause. Thought of me, like I was an afterthought. A passing flicker next to the gum and greeting cards. The sunlight sliced through the window, laying hard lines across the kitchen floor. It caught the cinnamon I'd sprinkled on toast that morning, sweet and sharp, and nothing like the moment we were having now. He put the flowers in the sink, still wrapped, and turned to me with that lightness in his voice I used to mistake for charm. "Hope I didn't mess up your day," he said. I smiled faintly. But I didn't answer. I made the tea anyway. Not because I wanted to, not because I'd forgiven anything, just because that's what I do. I move through old habits like they still mean something. The kettle hissed on the stove, steam starting to fog the window above the sink. I pulled his favorite mug from the cabinet, the blue one with the chip near the handle. He never noticed the chip. I always did. I placed the sugar bowl on the table, even though he never used it. That, too, was a habit. The kitchen smelled like vanilla from the candle I'd lit earlier, trying to make the house feel warm. But even with the scent and the sun beaming through the window, something was off. The warmth didn't reach me. He sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, tapping at the screen like he hadn't just skipped over the one day a child should never forget. I poured the water, slow and steady, the whistle fading into a soft hum. The breeze rustled the tea towel that hung on the hook, lifting it gently before letting it fall again. As I placed the mug in front of him, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked like I was hosting a guest, not welcoming my son. I thought about how many cups I'd poured for people who never really saw me holding them. He took the mug and said, "Thanks, Mom," without lifting his eyes. I went back to the stove. My hands didn't shake. But they didn't feel steady either. "So, it's been a wild couple of weeks," he said, stirring his tea like he was gearing up for a speech. "Work's been crazy. I meant to call, but, everything's just nonstop." I nodded. The way you do when you already know the rhythm of someone's excuse. The words sounded nice, carefully chosen, softened at the edges, but they didn't touch me. They floated, light as dry leaves in the October wind. "I actually thought your birthday was next weekend," he added, glancing at me with a small laugh. I kept my hands around my cup. It was still warm, but I didn't feel it anymore. "That's okay," I said, voice soft. "You remembered eventually." He smiled like I'd given him a pass. "Exactly. I mean, better late than never, right?" I looked at him. Really looked. His collar slightly wrinkled, hair a little too styled, like he was trying to look more present than he really was. "I've been meaning to come by," he said, waving one hand like he could sweep away the missing time. "Just, you know how it gets." Birds chirped outside the window. Their song was light, but it sounded far away, like something playing in another room. "I do," I replied. "It gets busy." He nodded, more to himself than to me. Then went quiet for a second, sipping the tea like that pause would cover the parts he wasn't ready to say. The air between us thickened, not tense, just full. Full of years, of missed things, of truths dressed up to look like reasonable misunderstandings. I didn't argue. I let him talk. Let him string words together like beads that didn't quite match, because I already knew how the script ended. Talked more once the tea started cooling. Little things, his meetings, some vacation he was thinking about, a new client who drove him crazy. I nodded when it made sense, smiled once or twice, but most of the time, I just watched. Watched the way he leaned back like he owned the air in the room. Watched the way his eyes darted toward his phone every few minutes. And all the while, I sat still. Not cold, not angry, just quiet in a way that felt deep, like a lake in the early morning. It felt like watching a memory, like seeing someone I used to know replay a role they hadn't rehearsed in years. The sunlight hit the side of his face, making the dust in the air shimmer a little. He looked older, maybe more tired, but somehow smaller too. He laughed once, something about a coworker's birthday cake mishap. I laughed back, but it didn't reach me, not really. My smile stopped at the edges, never made it all the way in. He didn't notice. He never did. The cinnamon toast from earlier still lingered faintly, but even that scent felt like it was fading, like everything in the room was drifting backward. He kept talking, and I kept listening from somewhere far inside myself, where the ache no longer asked for attention. I thought about telling him, about the cake still in the freezer, the one I made just in case. His favorite, vanilla with the lemon frosting, candles still in the drawer, box never opened. But I didn't. He hadn't asked if I did anything for my birthday, hadn't even looked around to see if there were leftovers or signs, just sat there, sipping tea, letting his words take up space like they were doing something useful, So I let the cake sit, unspoken, like a story he hadn't earned the right to hear. The fridge hummed softly behind me, a low, steady sound that filled the quiet he never noticed. The shadows on the kitchen floor grew longer as the sun shifted. I could feel the ache in my chest, not sharp, just familiar, like something I'd made peace with but never fully put down. He told me he'd call soon, promised next time would be better. I nodded and said nothing about the cake. He stirred his tea slowly. Clink, clink, pause. The sound of the spoon against ceramic filled the space like a clock ticking inside my chest. I didn't speak. I waited. The tea had already cooled in my cup. I hadn't taken a sip since pouring. His cup steamed just barely now, the warmth starting to slip away. A robin chirped once outside the window, then fell quiet again. The breeze floated in with the faint scent of damp soil and old grass. I folded, my hands around my teacup, and looked down, waiting for the noise between us to settle. That tiny moment between his breath and mine. That's when the truth could live. Not loud, not rehearsed. Just there. He tapped the edge of the cup one last time and set the spoon aside. I looked up. His eyes were soft but distracted. He didn't know what was coming, and for once, I didn't need him to. Some things don't need to be shouted. They just need room to land. "There's something you should know," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. He looked up from his tea, eyes narrowing slightly, like he wasn't sure if I meant something serious or small. I didn't rush. I wanted him to sit with the words before they arrived. "I've made a change," I said gently. "To my will." He blinked, then nodded once. "Okay. What kind of change?" I reached beside me, picked up the folded paper I'd placed on the sideboard earlier, and set it next to his cup. Not close enough to make him flinch, but close enough that he knew it was meant for him. "There's a clause," I continued. "It's been there for a while. Years, actually." I added it quietly. "Pending demonstration of active care." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "that love is something we do, not just something we say, and that inheritance, whatever that means to you, isn't automatic. It's connected to something deeper." He looked at the folded paper like it might open itself and speak. "You're saying I might not be included?" I didn't answer right away. I placed a napkin beside his plate, smoothed the edge like I was tucking something in. "I'm saying you were never excluded, not unless you chose to be." His eyes searched mine, not for the clause, but for blame. I offered none. No scolding. No list of what he'd forgotten. Just the truth, folded. Neatly, waiting, like I had. He looked down at the paper like it had weight, and maybe it did, but not the kind you measure in money. I saw the flicker in his eyes, the brief confusion giving way to something else. He thought this was punishment. He thought I was angry. I leaned forward slightly, hands wrapped around my cup. The wood of the chair creaked softly under my weight. "It was never about the money," I said. "Not sharp, not dramatic, just simple." He opened his mouth, but I kept going. "This wasn't meant to scare you or hurt you. I added that clause back when you first stopped calling for weeks at a time, when birthdays started slipping past without a text, when visits turned into once-a-year obligations." The garden breeze drifted in again, carrying the scent of cut grass and lavender. I breathed it in. "I didn't do it because I wanted to punish you," I continued. "I did it because I wanted to believe there'd be a reason not to use it." He said nothing. His eyes met mine briefly, then dropped to the table. "The money is just paper," I whispered. "What I wanted was presence. Not just a phone call on holidays, not flowers from the gas station aisle. I wanted to know that you still saw me, not just as your mother, but as someone who still mattered." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I could see it. The slow crumbling of that assumption that love would always be there even if neglected. "I'm not angry," I added, "but I've learned to stop making space for people who don't show up." He looked at the paper again. This time, differently. Not like it betrayed him, but like maybe it reflected something he hadn't wanted to see. And I sat there, quiet in my truth, letting the breeze carry it where it needed to go. He didn't speak right away. His fingers traced the edge of the napkin on the table. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. The light outside had shifted, turning warmer, deep gold spilling across the windowsill. He glanced toward me, but the usual quick smile didn't come. Instead, there was just stillness, and in that stillness, something passed between us. Not guilt, not shame, just a breath of understanding, new and slow. The kind that arrives too late to fix the past, but still matters somehow. He looked down at his tea, now lukewarm. Lifted it, but didn't drink. Set it back down carefully. Like he didn't want to make any more noise than necessary. I didn't move. I just watched him, not with judgment, but with the ache of all the quiet birthdays, all the waiting that never turned into arrival. Outside, a bee hovered lazily near the window box. The room held its breath with us, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't try to fill the silence. I didn't say anything more. I let the quiet stretch between us, not as distance, but as space. The kind of space that teaches. I sipped my tea slowly. It had gone cool, but it was still mine, still full, still enough. He shifted once in his chair, then stopped. The usual fidgeting, the glancing at the clock or phone. It didn't come this time. Outside, the breeze pushed gently at the curtains. A single petal from the flower pot on the sill let go, floated down, and landed between us on the table. He stared at it for a second, and I think he felt it too, the weight of what had been left unsaid for years, not heavy like blame, but steady, present. He looked up, opened his mouth again, then closed it. And I didn't feel the silence, because it was already full, with truth, with ache, with the slow unfurling of something that might be understanding. Let the silence hold the lesson, because sometimes that's where the real conversation lives. I turned on the old brass lamp in the hallway, the one James wired himself back when the walls still echoed with his careful humming. It flickered once, then glowed soft and sure, casting a gold ring across the floorboards. That lamp had always felt like a kind of anchor, a quiet declaration that home was still here, still lit, still waiting. I stepped into the garden as twilight began softening the edges of everything. The sky stretched out above me in golden pink, melting slowly into blue. The jasmine had opened with the cooling of the air, its scent thick and sweet, mixing with the warm soil beneath my feet. The wind brushed against the garden gate, not pushing, just greeting, like an old friend passing by to say, "You're doing fine." I wasn't sad. That surprised me. There were days that held ache, but this evening wasn't one of them. This one was made for stillness. I sat in my chair beneath the maple tree and listened. The birds were quieter now, and the world had pulled on its softer coat. Nothing needed to be fixed or planned or held together. It just needed to be felt, and I was full. The ink had dried long ago. I read the page one last time, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to feel the choice settle fully in my chest. My hands didn't tremble. My breath didn't catch. It was peace that moved through me, calm, deliberate peace. Emma's name sat there, written in neat letters, just beneath mine. Not bold, not loud, just right, like a lantern placed beside a child's bed, quiet, glowing, safe. I signed just below it. Slow, certain strokes of the pen. No anger in the motion, no regret. Just knowing. The garden breeze drifted through the study window, curling around my arms as I smoothed the paper flat once more. The air smelled of lavender, soft and dry, and something sharper underneath. Fresh ink, like possibility. Outside, a dove called once, then nothing. I folded the paper carefully, pressing the creases with the side of my hand, the way I always had with things that mattered. Then I opened the drawer. Not the filing cabinet. The one that holds what truly matters, cards, photos, one of James' cufflinks that never found its pair. I tucked the paper in, gently, and shut the drawer with care. I wrapped both hands around the mug and felt its heat settle into my fingers. I walked out barefoot onto the lawn, the blades of grass cool and soft under my arches. The earth was damp from the afternoon watering. It welcomed me. That's what it felt like, being welcomed. The sky above had turned a softer pink now, like it had exhaled. The light was fading, but it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like permission to rest. The air carried the scent of jasmine and the steam from my tea. I breathed in both as I made my way to the old iron bench by the rose trellis. I sat down slowly, careful not to spill, and let the weight of the day fall off my shoulders. The tea was sweet, just enough honey, and the cup was warm against my palms. I took a small sip and let it linger on my tongue. Leaves rustled gently above me, whispering things I didn't need to answer. And even though I was alone out there, I didn't feel it. I wasn't alone. Not really. I held the mug close to my chest and looked up toward the darkening sky. The last streaks of pink had faded, giving way to a soft, dusky blue. The lilac bushes swayed gently to my left, their tops just catching the breeze. "Emma," I said softly. Just once, not to the sky, to the wind. It carried her name the way. Only the wind can. Light, invisible, but deeply present. I imagined it lifting over the rooftops, curling through trees, brushing past her cheeks, even if she didn't know why she smiled. Love doesn't always travel in straight lines. Sometimes. It skips, loops, circles back. She reminded me of that it can land where it's needed most. That it can come from those who weren't expected to hold it. The wind chimes clinked gently on the porch. Not loud, not urgent. Just enough to say, "I heard you." And I believed it. The stars had started to appear, small pricks of silver, against the deep blue above. I let my head fall back to watch them, the weight of the day finally gone. The wind had settled, softer now, like even it was tired and ready to rest. I didn't need anyone watching. Didn't need anyone clapping their hands or giving me words. I had this, just this, me, the garden, the hush of night, and a quiet truth rooted deep in my bones. I remember who remembers me. That truth didn't ache. It warmed. It filled the spaces, left by absence with something steadier, something like peace. If you've ever found quiet strength in letting go or being held by a simple act of love, I'd be honored to hear your story too. And if these moments speak to you, you're welcome to stay a while with me here. If my story touched your heart, I kindly ask you to like this video and subscribe. I'll be here every day, sharing more stories just for you. Thank you, my dear.